You know that feeling when you work so hard for something, you can almost taste it. You stay late, you skip lunch breaks, you give everything you have, and you just know deep down that it is finally your time. That was me, exactly 1 year ago. I had been at that company for 4 years. 4 years of showing up early, staying late, taking on extra projects that nobody else wanted, and never once complaining about it. I genuinely loved what I did, and I thought that love showed in my work. My manager had been dropping hints for months. Little comments like, "We see big things coming for you," and "Just keep doing what you are doing." I held on to every single one of those words like they were written in stone. I told my mom. I told my best friend. I even started mentally redecorating my future office. That is how sure I was. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to comment one word that describes someone who has ever stolen credit from you at work. Just one word. I am reading every single one. Drop it right now. Her name was Dana. She joined our team about 8 months before all of this happened. She was friendly, she was charming, and she smiled at everyone like she was running for office. When she first started, I actually liked her. I showed her how things worked, I introduced her to the right people, I shared shortcuts that took me years to figure out. I was genuinely trying to help her because I remembered how lost I felt in my first few weeks there. I thought we were building a real friendship. I thought wrong. The promotion I was going for was a senior project lead position. It was not just a title change. It came with a 30% salary increase, your own team to manage, and a seat at the table in the big quarterly meetings. I had been working toward that specific role for almost 2 years. My manager, whose name was Richard, had basically told me in our last one-on-one that I was the leading candidate. He used those exact words. Leading candidate. I wrote it down in my notes app the second I left his office because I did not want to forget how that felt. What I did not know was that Dana had been having her own private conversations with Richard. Not just about work, but about strategy, about the direction of the department, about ideas. And here is the part that still makes my stomach turn when I think about it. A lot of those ideas. They were mine. We used to eat lunch together a few times a week, and I would talk through my thoughts out loud because that is just how I process things. I was not being careless. I trusted her. I thought I was just venting to a friend. But Dana was listening to every single word with a completely different agenda. She started presenting my ideas in team meetings before I had the chance to. Not all at once, she was smart about it. Just one here, one there, always framed as something she had been thinking about. I noticed it the first time it happened and I told myself I was being paranoid. The second time, I felt a little sick. By the third time, I knew exactly what was going on, but I had no proof, and I did not know what to do about it. So I just kept working. I kept showing up. I told myself that Richard could see the difference between us and that the truth would come out on its own. Comment, karma. Right now if you already know where this is going. Or comment, too far, if you think you would have handled it differently. I want to see which side takes over this comment section. The day the promotion decision was announced, Richard called us both into his office separately. I went in first. He sat across from me with this expression that I can only describe as professionally uncomfortable, and he told me that after a lot of consideration, they had decided to go with Dana for the senior project lead role. He said she had shown exceptional strategic thinking in recent months, and that she had really impressed the leadership team. He said my time would come. He said to keep doing what I was doing. The same words he had used to get my hopes up were now being used to let me down. And I just sat there nodding like everything was fine because I did not trust myself to speak without crying. I went to the bathroom, locked the stall, and just stood there for a few minutes. I did not cry. I was too angry to cry. I was so angry that it felt cold, like something had turned off inside me. And in that moment, standing in that bathroom stall, I made a decision. I was not going to explode. I was not going to march back in there and accuse Dana of anything. I was not going to send a frustrated email or complain to HR without a plan. I was going to be smart about this. I was going to be so smart and so quiet that nobody would even see it coming. The first thing I did was start documenting everything. Every idea I had, I wrote it down with a date and a timestamp before I shared it with anyone. I started keeping records of my contributions in a private folder that only I had access to. I stopped eating lunch with Dana. When she asked why, I told her I had been busy, and I smiled when I said it. She seemed relieved by that answer, which told me everything I needed to know about her conscience. The second thing I did was change how I communicated at work. Instead of thinking out loud in casual conversations, I started putting my ideas in writing first. I would send emails to Richard before meetings laying out my thinking in detail. I wanted a paper trail that could not be erased or borrowed without someone noticing. I was building a case, not because I planned to file a complaint, but because I needed to protect myself going forward and I needed to know that I was covered. The third thing I did was the one that ended up mattering the most. I reached out to a few people in other departments who I had worked with on cross-team projects over the years. Not to talk about Dana, not to say anything negative about anyone, just to reconnect and remind them that I existed. I had a coffee chat with a woman named Patricia who led the operations team. I had a quick call with someone in marketing who I had collaborated with on a campaign 2 years earlier. I was quietly reminding the right people that I was good at what I did, and I was doing it without making a single sound. Dana, meanwhile, was settling into her new role with a lot of confidence. She redecorated the office I had mentally claimed for myself, which I found out because someone on my team mentioned it and I had to pretend I did not care. She started leading the Monday morning meetings and copying the executive team on her emails. From the outside, it looked like she had completely won. And maybe in that moment she had. But I had stopped playing the same game she was playing. I was playing a longer one. Have you ever had someone take something that was rightfully yours and just had to sit there and watch them enjoy it? Comment, "IT was me," if this has happened to you. I want you to know you are not alone in this comment section, and I am reading everything you write. 3 months after Dana got that promotion, something started to shift. The projects she had taken over were not performing the way leadership had expected. The strategies she had presented so confidently in meetings were not translating into real results, and people were starting to notice. Richard started looking a little less comfortable in her presence. The executive team started asking questions in those big quarterly meetings that she had fought so hard to get a seat at. And Dana, for all her charm and her smiling and her perfectly timed ideas, did not have the depth of experience to back any of it up when the pressure got real. Because the thing about borrowed ideas is that they come without the understanding that built them. She could repeat what I said, but she could not answer the follow-up questions. She could present the strategy, but she could not defend it when someone pushed back. And in that company, people always pushed back. I had spent 4 years learning how to handle that pressure. She had spent 8 months collecting my words without collecting any of the hard lessons underneath them. Around the 4-month mark, I got an email from Patricia in operations. It was short and casual, just a few lines asking if I had some time to jump on a quick call that week. I said yes immediately, but I kept my expectations neutral because I did not want to read too much into it. We got on the call 2 days later and she told me that her team was taking on a massive new project, one that required someone with strong project management skills and a track record of cross-departmental collaboration. She had thought of me. She wanted to know if I would be interested in being involved as a lead contributor, working directly with her and reporting into the executive team on progress. It was not a promotion in title, not yet, but it was visibility at a level I had never had before. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. What I did not know in that moment was that Patricia had also mentioned my name to 2 members of the executive team before reaching out to me. She had described me as someone who was reliable, creative under pressure, and easy to work with. She had used her own credibility to vouch for me, and she did that because I had invested in that relationship genuinely, not because I was using her for anything. That is something I want you to really hear. The quiet work I had been doing, the reconnecting, the coffee chats, the simple act of reminding people that I existed and that I was good, that was not manipulation. That was just playing smart in a world that does not always reward the loudest person in the room. Stop right here before I tell you what happened next. I want you to predict in the comments what you think Dana did when she found out I was working directly with the executive team. Write your prediction right now. The most accurate comment gets pinned. I am serious, go write it. I threw everything I had into that operations project. I mean everything. I was sending detailed progress updates. I was solving problems before they became problems. I was communicating clearly with every single stakeholder involved. I was doing what I had always done, except now I was doing it in front of people who had the actual power to change my career. Every meeting I was in, I made sure I was prepared. Every email I sent, I made sure it was precise. I was not performing for anyone. I was just finally working in a room where the right people could see it. Dana noticed. Of course she noticed. The first sign was that she started showing up to meetings she had not been invited to, ones where I was presenting or contributing. She would slip in at the last minute and find a seat near the back, and I would feel her watching me the whole time. I never acknowledged it. I never looked over at her or changed my energy in any way. I just kept doing what I was doing because I had learned by that point that the best response to someone waiting for you to fail is to just keep succeeding. The second sign was that she started being overly friendly to me again. She would stop by my desk to chat. She would send me messages on the company platform asking how things were going. She would compliment my work in group settings in this very deliberate way that felt more like a warning than a compliment. I was polite back every single time. Short, warm, and completely unreadable. I had nothing to prove to her and I had nothing to hide, so I gave her nothing to work with. By month 5, the operations project was getting serious attention from the top of the company. The executive team was referencing it in all-hands meetings as an example of the kind of cross-departmental work they wanted to see more of. My name was being mentioned in those conversations. Not Dana's. Mine. I remember the first time I heard someone from the executive team say my name in a meeting I was not even supposed to be in. One of my colleagues told me about it afterward, and I had to pretend to be calm while my whole chest felt like it was on fire in the best possible way. And then month 6 arrived. I want you to pause right here and comment one word for how you are feeling right now in this story. Just one word. Are you nervous, excited, satisfied, angry? Drop it in the comments because I genuinely want to know where your head is at before I tell you what happened. IT started on a Tuesday. Richard called an emergency department meeting with no agenda listed, which at our company always meant something significant had happened. Everyone showed up looking slightly nervous, the way people do when they do not know if the news is about them or someone else. Richard walked in with someone from HR, which made the nervous energy in the room go up about 3 levels. He announced that there had been some concerns raised about the management of several key projects under the senior project lead role, and that the company was going to be making some structural changes to how that role was defined and supported going forward. He was careful with his words, the way people are when lawyers have already been involved. He did not say Dana's name once during that meeting. He did not have to. After the meeting, people scattered into small quiet conversations the way they always do when something big just happened and nobody is sure what they are allowed to say out loud. I went back to my desk and kept working. I already knew more than I was letting on, not because I had done anything to cause this, but because I had been close enough to the executive team in recent months to understand what the structural changes actually meant. What Richard called a restructuring, the executive team had been privately describing for weeks as a correction. The projects Dana had been leading were significantly underperforming. 2 of the company's biggest clients had raised concerns directly with leadership. And the strategy she had been presenting as her own had begun to fall apart in the specific ways that only happen when the person presenting them does not truly understand them from the inside. 3 days after that meeting, Dana was called into Richard's office. I did not find out what happened in that room from gossip. I found out because Dana came to find me afterward. She walked up to my desk looking like a completely different person from the one who had been sending me cheerful messages just 2 weeks earlier. Her face was tight and her voice was quieter than usual, and she asked if I had a few minutes to talk privately. I said sure, and I followed her to one of the small glass conference rooms near the back of the floor. She sat down across from me and she told me that her role was being eliminated as part of the restructuring. She said it in a flat, rehearsed way, like she had already said it to herself 50 times in the last hour, trying to make it feel less real. And then she said something I was not prepared for. She asked me if I would be willing to put in a good word for her. She said she knew I had relationships with people on the executive team now, and she thought maybe if I said something positive it might help her situation. She said she had always respected my work. She said she hoped there were no hard feelings between us. I want you to comment right now what you think I said to her. Seriously, pause this and write it in the comments. Because what I actually said is not what most people expect, and I think your reaction to it is going to tell you a lot about yourself. I looked at her for a moment, and I did not feel the rush of satisfaction I had been expecting to feel for 6 months. I thought I would feel triumphant in that room. I thought I would feel some version of finally. But what I actually felt was something quieter and more settled than that. I felt clear. I felt like everything made sense in a way that it had not for a long time. I told her that I appreciated her saying that, and I told her that I genuinely hoped she landed somewhere good. And I meant it. Not because what she did was okay, it was not, and I had never pretended to myself that it was. But because holding on to anger at someone whose own choices had already caught up with them felt like carrying weight that was no longer mine to carry. I had spent 6 months building something real. I was not going to let her take up space in that either. I walked out of that conference room and I went straight back to my desk and I just sat there for a minute. Not celebrating, not replaying the conversation. Just sitting. There was something almost strange about how calm I felt. 6 months earlier I had stood in a bathroom stall shaking with cold anger and making a silent promise to myself. And now here I was on the other side of it, and it did not feel like a movie moment. It did not feel like a dramatic victory. It just felt like the natural end of something that was always going to end this way. That is the thing nobody tells you about playing a long game. The payoff does not always feel explosive. Sometimes it just feels like peace. But the story was not over yet. Not even close. The week after Dana's role was eliminated, Patricia called me into her office for what she described as a quick check-in. I had been in enough of these meetings by now to know that quick check-ins with Patricia were rarely actually quick. She had a way of starting conversations casually and then walking you right into something significant before you realized you were already in the middle of it. I sat down across from her and she asked me how I was feeling about the project, about the team, about my overall situation at the company. I gave her honest answers because I had never been anything but honest with Patricia and I was not about to change that now. And then she slid a single piece of paper across her desk toward me. Before I tell you what was on that paper, I need you to do something. Go to the comments right now and type the word slide if you have been watching this whole video because you deserve to know what happened next and I want to see exactly how many of you have been with me this whole time. Drop it right now. It was a job description. A new job description for a role that had just been created, a role called Senior Strategy and Operations Lead, which was essentially a combination of the project lead position I had originally been passed over for and the cross-departmental responsibilities I had been handling for the last few months. It was a bigger role than the one Dana had just lost. It came with a higher salary band, a direct reporting line to the executive team, and the authority to build out a small team underneath it. Patricia told me that my name had come up in executive discussions as the obvious candidate. She used that word. Obvious. And she told me that if I wanted it, the conversation was already halfway done. I picked up that piece of paper and I read every single line of it. And I remember thinking that this role, this exact combination of responsibilities, was essentially the job I had been quietly doing for the last 4 months without the title or the compensation. I had built the case for my own promotion without even realizing that was what I was doing. I had not schemed my way into this room. I had worked my way into it. One documented idea, one honest relationship, one well-prepared meeting at a time. I told Patricia I was very interested and she told me the formal process would begin the following week. She also told me, and this part she said carefully and with a look that communicated more than her words did, that several people on the executive team had specifically noted the contrast between how I had handled the last 6 months and how the previous person in a leadership-adjacent role had handled things. She did not say Dana's name. She did not need to. The contrast she was describing had already written itself. Have you ever worked so hard in silence that you started to wonder if anyone was actually watching? Comment, they saw it. if you believe the right people always notice eventually. I want to see how many of you still believe that, because honestly this experience made me believe it more than I ever have in my entire life. The formal interview process took about 2 weeks. I met with 3 members of the executive team individually, and then once as a group. I was not nervous in the way I used to get nervous before high-stakes conversations. I was prepared in a way that went deeper than just having good answers ready. I was prepared because I had been living the job already. Every question they asked me I could answer with a specific example from something real I had done in the last few months. Every challenge they raised I had already encountered and solved in some form. It was the cleanest interview experience of my entire career because there was no gap between who I was presenting myself to be and who I had actually been showing up as every single day. 2 days after the final interview, Richard sent me a calendar invite for a meeting with no subject line. I stared at that invite for about 10 seconds and then I accepted it and went back to work because I had learned over the last 6 months that the best thing you can do while you are waiting for something important is to keep moving like it has already happened. I walked into that meeting and Richard was sitting there with Patricia and one member of the HR team. Richard did most of the talking. He told me that the company was thrilled to offer me the senior strategy and operations lead position. He talked about my contributions, my consistency, my ability to build trust across departments. He said the executive team had been impressed not just by my work, but by the way I carried myself during what he called a challenging period. I sat across from him and I accepted the offer and I thanked everyone in the room and I shook hands and I walked out of there with a title, a salary, and a team that nobody could take from me because I had earned every single piece of it in a way that was completely and entirely documented. And then I went to the bathroom. The same bathroom. The same stall where I had stood 6 months earlier with cold anger burning through me and a promise forming in my chest. I stood in that same spot and I just breathed for a minute. And I thought about every early morning and every late night and every moment I had swallowed something sharp and kept moving anyway. And I thought about Dana sitting across from me in that glass conference room asking me for help. And I thought about the fact that I had meant what I said to her. I genuinely hoped she landed somewhere better suited to who she actually was. Because the version of her that took what was mine was a person operating out of fear and insecurity, and I had spent enough time carrying anger about it. I was done with that weight. Pause this right now and tag someone in your life who needs to hear this story. Someone who is in the middle of their own silent season right now. Someone who is doing the right thing and wondering if it is ever going to matter. Tag them right now because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is just let them know that the long game is real and it is worth playing. My first week in the new role, I had 3 things on my agenda. The first was to meet individually with every person on my new team and ask them one question. What is the one thing about this team that you wish leadership understood better? I wrote down every answer and I kept every one of those conversations confidential. The second thing was to go through every project file from the last 6 months and understand exactly where things stood, what was working, what was not, and what needed to be rebuilt from scratch. The third thing was to send a handwritten thank you note to Patricia. Not an email, an actual note on actual paper, because she had gone out of her way for me when she did not have to, and I believe that kind of thing deserves more than a reply in a thread. In my second week, I presented my first strategy overview to the executive team. I had spent 2 full evenings building it out, not because I was trying to impress anyone but because I wanted to walk in there with something real. Something that showed I understood the problems and had thought carefully about the solutions. When I finished presenting, the most senior person in the room, someone who had never once spoken directly to me before any of this began, looked up from his notes and said that was exactly the kind of thinking this company had been missing. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. I knew what he meant, and so did everyone else in that room. The company never officially announced what happened to Dana. She was just gone one day the way people sometimes are in corporate environments, there and then not there, her name slowly disappearing from email threads and project files and calendar invites. I heard through someone that she had landed a role at a smaller company in a different industry. I hope it is going well for her. I mean that with no sarcasm and no edge behind it whatsoever. I want to take a second here and just be honest with you because I think you have earned that by staying with me through this whole story. When I started this journey, I was not some calm, calculated person who had everything figured out. I was hurt. I was genuinely, deeply hurt in a way that surprised me because I thought I was tougher than that. I thought 4 years of navigating a competitive workplace had made me harder to wound. But sitting in that bathroom stall on the day Dana got the promotion I had worked toward for 2 years, I realized that being tough and being human are two completely different things, and you do not get to choose which one shows up first when something unfair happens to you. The anger I felt was real. The embarrassment was real. The shame of having told my mom and my best friend that I was about to get promoted and then having to quietly walk that back. That was one of the hardest phone calls I have ever made in my life. My mom asked me if I was okay, and I said yes, and she knew I was lying, and she let me lie because she understood that sometimes you need to say you are fine out loud before you can actually start becoming fine. I want you to hear that part of the story too, not just the victory, because I think we do each other a disservice when we only share the highlight reel and skip over the part where we were sitting on the bathroom floor of our own confidence wondering if we had completely misjudged ourselves. Comment right now if you have ever had to make that phone call. The one where you have to tell someone who believed in you that the thing you both got excited about did not happen. Just comment, that call. And I will know exactly what you mean, and so will everyone else reading these comments, because more people have made that call than will ever admit it out loud. The thing that kept me moving when everything in me wanted to either blow up or shut down was one decision that I made very early on and held on to very tightly. I decided that I was going to let my work be louder than my feelings. Not because my feelings did not matter, they did, but because I understood that in the environment I was in, an emotional reaction would be remembered long after the injustice that caused it had been forgotten. People would forget what Dana did. They would not forget how I responded to it. And I wanted the way I responded to be something I was proud of 3 years later, regardless of how things turned out. That is the part one really need you to sit with. Regardless of how things turned out. Because here is the truth that nobody wants to say in these kinds of stories. Sometimes you do everything right, and the karma does not come in 6 months. Sometimes it takes 3 years. Sometimes the person who wronged you seems to thrive for a long time before anything shifts. And you have to decide whether you are going to keep building your own thing while that is happening, or whether you're going to spend that time watching them and waiting and letting your energy leak out in the direction of someone who has already taken enough from you. I chose to build. Not perfectly, not without bad days, not without moments where I opened LinkedIn and looked at Dana's profile and felt that cold anger creeping back in. But I kept choosing to come back to my own lane. I kept choosing to put the next brick down. And eventually, brick by brick, I had built something that nobody could walk into a conference room and claim as their own because it was not a collection of ideas anymore. It was a body of work with my name woven all the way through it. Tag someone right now who is in their building season. Someone who is doing the quiet work and not getting the loud recognition yet. Tag them in the comments and just say, keep building. Because sometimes that is the most important thing another person can hear, and it costs you absolutely nothing to say it. I also want to talk about Dana for a second in a way that might be uncomfortable for some of you. I know a lot of people watching this wanted me to end the story with some kind of confrontation. Some moment where I looked her in the eye and laid out everything she had done and watched her face fall apart. I understand that impulse completely. There is something in us that wants the wrongdoer to be forced to see themselves clearly, to have no escape from the accounting of what they did. But here is what I have come to understand about people like Dana. The confrontation you imagine having with them, the perfect speech, the irrefutable evidence, the moment of reckoning, it almost never gives you what you think it is going to give you. Because people who are capable of doing what she did are also capable of rationalizing it completely. She would have had an explanation. She would have reframed it. She would have found a way to make herself the victim of the story before you even finished your sentence. The closure you are looking for from that conversation does not live in that conversation. It lives in what you build after it. The real confrontation happened in that glass conference room when she sat across from me and asked for my help. Not because I had some power over her in that moment, but because in that moment we both knew the full truth of everything that had happened and neither of us needed to say a single word about it. That silence was the confrontation. That room was the accounting. And the fact that I was able to sit in it with genuine calm and genuine goodwill toward her, that was the real victory. Not the title. Not the salary. Not the executive team saying my name in meetings. The fact that I had gotten through all of it without becoming someone I did not recognize. I need you to hear this next part very carefully because I think it is the most important thing I'm going to say in this entire video. The person who tried to take something from you is not the most dangerous threat to your future. You are. The most dangerous thing that can happen after someone wrongs you is that you let what they did change who you are in ways that hurt you more than they ever could. You become bitter and you start treating new people with the suspicion that one person earned. You become closed off and you stop sharing your ideas and your energy and your genuine self because you got burned once. You become so focused on watching the person who hurt you that you stop watching where you are going. That is how they win without even trying anymore. That is how one bad actor gets to shape your entire future without ever being in the room. Oh, not let them have that. Build the wall you need to build. Protect yourself the way you need to protect yourself. Document and strategize and move smart. But do not close your heart all the way. Do not become so armored that the good people who come after cannot get through either. The goal is discernment, not isolation. The goal is wisdom, not walls. If this story hit something real in you today, I want you to do 3 things right now. First, share this video with one person who needs to hear it. Not because I'm asking you to help my channel, but because somebody in your life is sitting in their own version of that bathroom stall right now and they need to know that the story does not end there. Second, subscribe if you are not already because I tell these kinds of stories every single week and I promise you every one of them has something real inside it worth taking with you. And third, and this is the most important one, go do the next right thing in your own situation. Not the explosive thing. Not the revenge fantasy thing. The next quiet, strategic, dignity-preserving right thing. Because that is what actually works. That is what this whole story was really about. I spent 6 months being so silent that people forgot I was watching. And then one day the right people looked up and realized I had been building the whole time. And that is exactly what I want for you. Not just the karma moment, not just the victory scene, but the version of yourself that comes out on the other side of an unfair situation with your integrity completely intact and your future completely open. That is all I have got for you today. I will see you in the next one.